Good morning. Thank you for watching Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my team. Following news have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Australian, African, Asian channels and AFP, AP, and writer Donald Trump, close ally Rudy Giuliani, and dozen others were charged in Arizona. In hush money case in New York court, Donald Trump chooses not to testify. Late-night talk show host Bill Maher. A 5-day mourning period is started in Iran. France, Belgium, Slovenia supported the decision of international court regarding Israel and Hamas. Anthony Blinken criticized Israel again. Police Palestinian protests in Michigan University. 12 artificial intelligence companies have promised to use AI as a security tool. 6 Palestinians killed today in Israeli bombing. New Caledonia and the French troops. Singapore airline jet. Russia launches a space weapon. Elvis Presley's granddaughter's property problems. Serial killer in Canada.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett. On the Navaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Rudy Giuliani is one of a dozen Trump allies charged in Arizona for their involvement in a fake elector scheme. The defense rests its case after Donald Trump chooses not to testify in his criminal hush money trial. And late-night talk show host Bill Maher reflects on his decades of comedy and commentary and today's political climate.
We have to learn to live with, sit with, mingle with people who don't think like you. They're not raised like you. They weren't from a part of the country that you're from. And it's okay.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The legal fallout for alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election continued in Arizona today. Rudy Giuliani and 11 other allies of former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to charges that include conspiracy, fraud, and forgery. It's connected to the plot to install fake electors to back Trump despite President Biden winning the state in the 2020 election. Following all of this closely is Ned Foley. He's an election law expert at The Ohio State University. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
And it's worth noting that Arizona prosecutors spent weeks trying to find Rudy Giuliani. They ultimately located him based on some of his podcasts, and he was served a summons while he was leaving his 80th birthday party in Palm Beach, Florida. Ned Foley with The Ohio State University. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
From Arizona now to New York, where Donald Trump's defense team rested its case today in the trial brought against the former president by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Donald Trump did not testify. Next week, lawyers from both sides will make their closing statements to the jury, and then deliberations will begin. As William Brangham explains, while this case is often referred to as the hush money trial, the charges against the former president are far more complicated. William?
Donald Trump is not being charged with making that 2016 hush money payment to silence adult.
Good to see you.
In the day's other headlines, a 5-day mourning period has started in Iran for late President Ibrahim Raisi and other victims of Sunday's helicopter crash. Early today, thousands of mourners crowded around a truck carrying the caskets through Tabriz. That's the closest major city to the crash site. Later, the bodies were flown to Tehran, where they were met by an honor guard. Iranian officials have not provided any cause of the crash, which took place amid dense fog above a mountain range. France, Belgium, and Slovenia have backed the International Criminal Court's decision to seek arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his defense minister Yoav Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders. They're accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity for actions taken during the war in Gaza and Israel. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told a Senate committee today the ICC's decision was, quote, extremely wrong-headed, but he emphasized the U.S. still has concerns about Israel's military operations.
When your close friend is going down a path that you think may be counter to its interests and potentially our own as well, then of course we have conversations with them. That's what we're supposed to do. That's the nature of the relationship.
Meantime, Israel's communications minister has ordered that camera equipment be returned to the Associated Press after officials moved to block the company's live feed of Gaza earlier today. Israel had accused the AP of violating a new media law by providing video to Al Jazeera. Israel has long accused the Qatari satellite channel of having an anti-Israel bias. Officials shut down the broadcaster's local offices earlier this month. Police broke up a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Michigan today, citing a threat to public safety. Before sunrise, protesters on the Ann Arbor campus came face-to-face with rows of officers dressed in protective riot gear. Police cleared about 50 people from the site and arrested 4 others. Tensions had escalated in recent days after demonstrators placed fake body bags on a school official's lawn. The Justice Department is suing Oklahoma over a law that would make it a crime to live in the state as an undocumented immigrant. Those convicted under the law, set to take effect July 1st, would face 2 years in prison. DOJ official Brian Boynton said in a statement, quote, "We have brought this action to ensure that Oklahoma adheres to the Constitution and the framework adopted by Congress for regulation of immigration." Similar laws in Texas and Iowa are also facing legal challenges. More than a dozen companies at the forefront of artificial intelligence made renewed pledges today to develop the technology safely. At a virtual summit hosted by South Korea, companies like Microsoft, X, Samsung, and OpenAI promised public transparency and accountability in their AI innovations. They even offered to shut down their systems if they can't control risks created by the technology. South Korea's president welcomed their shared commitment to these universal guardrails.
먼저 AI가 미칠 수 있는
We must ensure the safety of AI to minimize its potential negative impacts and protect the well-being and democracy of our society. In this regard, I welcome efforts by leading countries such as the UK and the US to establish AI safety institutes.
The 2-day meeting is a follow-up to last year's AI Safety Summit in the UK and comes amid a broad effort by governments and international organizations to address potential risks from the emerging technology. Former President Trump has taken down a video posted to his social media account that included a reference to a, quote, unified Reich. The term is often associated with Nazi Germany's Third Reich. In the 30-second video, the phrase flashes during a montage of hypothetical pro-Trump headlines. His campaign said it was not an official campaign video and blamed a staffer for reposting it. President Biden's campaign called out the incident, writing on social media that, quote, Donald Trump posting a unified Reich video is part of a pattern of his praise for dictators and echoing anti-Semitic tropes. He's a threat to our democracy, and Americans must reject him and stand up for our democracy this November. The Biden administration announced a new effort today to lower gas prices in time for the summer driving season. The Energy Department is releasing 1 million barrels of gasoline from a reserve in the Northeast. In a statement, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said, quote, "We are ensuring sufficient supply flows to the tri-state area and Northeast at a time hardworking Americans need it the most." The average price for a gallon of gas nationwide is about $3.60. That's up 6 cents from last year. On Wall Street today, stocks crept higher ahead of closely watched earnings from AI heavyweight NVIDIA due out tomorrow. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added 66 points to close at 39,872. The Nasdaq gained 37 points to close at a new all-time high. The S&P 500 also notched a new record, adding 13 points. And Elvis Presley's granddaughter is fighting an attempt to sell the singer's famous Graceland estate. A public auction had been scheduled for Thursday, but Riley Keough, that's Presley's granddaughter, sought a restraining order and filed a lawsuit to stop the sale. At issue is a company's claim that a loan using the Presley home as collateral went unpaid. A statement from Elvis Presley Enterprises, Inc. said, "These claims are fraudulent. There is no foreclosure sale." Still to come on the NewsHour, severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight from London results in a death and dozens of injuries. Taiwan's new president takes office and calls on China to stop threatening the island. A retiree who lost his home to rising seawaters and storms sues the British government for failing to protect him from climate change.
This is the PBF NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington.
Sues the British government for failing to protect him from climate change.
This is the PBF NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
One person is dead and roughly 70 others injured after a Singapore Airlines flight headed from London to Singapore hit severe turbulence yesterday. The Boeing flight with 211 passengers and 18 crew on board descended 6,000 feet in the span of 3 minutes over the Indian Ocean, forcing the plane.
Place this again in history.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Gabrielle Hayes at the Missouri History Museum in St. Louis.
And there is more online, including a look at the descendants of people enslaved by St. Louis University who are asking the college's administration to take formal steps toward acknowledging their history. That's at pbs.org/newshour. And join us again here tomorrow night for a look at social media's role in the rise of violent crime committed by youth in America. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for joining us.
On this Tuesday night, terrifying turbulence. Harrowing accounts of what happened on a Singapore Airlines flight. What passengers endured, what causes clear air turbulence, and why it's becoming more common. New calls for the House of Commons Speaker to quit what Greg Fergus is being accused of. Serial killer clinging to life, the violent assault in prison against Robert Pickton. And when imitation is not the sincerest form of flattery.
That sounds just amazing.
Actor Scarlett Johansson's fury over ChatGPT ripping off her voice.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Every time you board a flight, you know there is a chance of turbulence, but what passengers endured on a Singapore Airlines flight from London to Singapore was extreme. It was so rough. A 73-year-old man suspected of having a heart condition died, and at least 30 other people were injured. The Boeing 777 suddenly hit severe turbulence over Myanmar. People not wearing seatbelts were launched into the ceiling. The injured ended up being carried out by stretcher. Redmond Shannon reports on what terrified passengers say happened on board that flight.
The aftermath of extreme turbulence on flight SQ321. It is very rare on commercial planes, but when it does happen, it can be terrifying.
Climate models predict every additional 1 degree Celsius rise in global warming will further increase turbulence. Boeing is making a $240 million investment in aerospace innovation in Canada in partnership with the Quebec government. The money will support a state-of-the-art aerospace development center in Montreal and Longueuil. It will be overseen by Aero Montreal, which aims to make Quebec a leader in the aerospace industry.
C'est le 3e site au monde pour la fabrication.
Premier François Legault says Quebec is the world's third largest aerospace manufacturing hub after Seattle and Toulouse, France. This investment is part of an agreement by Boeing last year to invest in Canada in exchange for a $5.9 billion deal by the federal government to buy up to 19 Boeing-made Poseidon military surveillance planes. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Philadelphia today, meeting with union leaders, the state governor, and the U.S. Vice President. It is the Prime Minister's first trip south of the border since announcing his government's renewed Team Canada strategy on U.S. relations. As Jackson Prosco explains, Trudeau is looking to shore up cross-border cooperation, no matter who wins the upcoming presidential election.
Though the audience of union members was friendly, the Prime Minister's trip to Philadelphia was all about playing defense.
More than ever, we should remind ourselves of how priceless.
Harris, just moments after she had delivered a fiery speech in which she warned that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to American democracy. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Philadelphia.
Prime Minister Trudeau was asked today about the International Criminal Court's decision to seek arrest warrants for the leaders of Israel and Hamas on allegations of crimes against humanity. He neither supported it nor rejected it.
Obviously, the International Criminal Court is independent in its work, and I've said from the very beginning how important it is that everyone respect and abide by international law.
Trudeau did say there is a troubling sense of equivalency between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and those who run Hamas. Canada lists Hamas as a terrorist organization. In the U.S., lawyers defending former President Donald Trump have now rested their case in his hush money trial. The defense called just 2 witnesses. Lawyer Michael Costello's testimony aimed to discredit the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen. Trump himself did not testify, despite saying he wanted to and falsely claiming that he is not allowed to. The jury has been sent home now, and the stage is set for closing arguments next Tuesday. Deliberations are expected to begin the following day. Trump is accused of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to paying off adult film star Stormy Daniels for her silence about an alleged affair before the 2016 presidential election. There are calls for the Speaker of Canada's House of Commons to resign. Greg Fergus was elected as a Liberal MP, but he is supposed to be neutral in his role as Speaker. The opposition Conservatives say he's failed to do that and claim it's not the first time. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he still has complete confidence in Fergus. Our chief political correspondent David Aiken explains what the whole thing is about.
Greg Fergus has been Speaker barely 7 months, and he's already facing his second call to quit.
For the good of the institution, of Parliament, and the enduring interest of the House of Commons, I regret...
Who have no confidence in his ability to be Parliament's neutral referee. Donna?
All right, David Aiken in Ottawa. Thank you, David. There's a bit of good news tonight for consumers. Canada's annual inflation rate fell to 2.7% in April, down 0.2% from March. That's the lowest inflation rate in 3 years. As Anne Gaviola explains, the rate of inflation will play a key role in the Bank of Canada's interest rate decision next month. Anne.
We've now seen 4 months of the annual cost of living increase coming in below the Bank of Canada's 3% target ceiling for inflation. Price declines were the story for people shopping for household furnishings, clothing and footwear. Food inflation also cooled as the price of food purchased at the grocery store slowed to 1.4% annually. That is down from year. We'll have to wait and see what the Bank of Canada says at its next interest rate announcement, June 5th. Donna?
All right, Anne Gaviola in Toronto. A notorious serial killer attacked, coming up what we know about the prison assault on Robert Pickton. Serial killer Robert Pickton is in critical condition after he was assaulted in the Quebec prison where he's serving 6 life sentences. Pickton was convicted in 2007. The remains, or DNA, of 33 women, many of whom were taken from Vancouver's downtown east side, were found on his farm in Port Coquitlam, BC. Ethan Garcher reports on the assault and the reaction.
Tammy Lynn Pappin's determined steps echo the resolute sentiment she feels as news of Robert Pickton's prison assault reverberates.
Georgina Pappin was my sister who is a victim of Robert Pickton. I don't wish no harm on anybody, but what happened to him, I really don't care. I believe in karma.
Quebec's Provincial Police Service said a major crimes investigation is underway into the assault, which happened shortly after 5 p.m. at Port Cartier Penitentiary, involving a 74-year-old man with life-threatening injuries. The suspect, a 51-year-old man, is still incarcerated.
I'm glad because now he knows what it feels to what he done to Janet, my sister. I don't want to hear about him anymore. I'm just sick and tired of him.
Correctional Service Canada confirms Pickton was involved in a major assault on Sunday, adding the assault did not involve any of our staff.
I'm actually very shocked. When inmate Pickton was at Kent Institution in Agassiz, BC, he had no interaction with any other inmate. He lived in a unit alone.
Alan Mullen, a former corrections officer at Kent Institution where Pickton was once incarcerated, questions how and why Pickton was able to interact with another inmate.
If and when Robert Pickton dies, a certain amount of the truth dies with him. So it's not just about, sort of protecting him.
Correctional Service Canada would not confirm details reported in the Vancouver Sun that Pickton was speared in the head with a broken broom-like handle by an attacker who allegedly earlier assaulted other inmates at the prison. The attack on Pickton allegedly happened after the assailant was then released back into the same unit as him.
One of the primary concerns I have, obviously, is around the security of these institutions.
When you have the most notorious serial killer in Canadian history, there's a certain amount of notoriety that goes along with assaulting him or potentially murdering him.
He emphasizes the necessity of ongoing investigations into Pickton's murders, particularly in light of compelling witness evidence suggesting he did not operate alone. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Morning in Iran ahead, the funeral for President Ibrahim Raisi. Thousands of Iranians gathered in the streets to mourn President Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash on the weekend. His coffin was carried through the holy city of Qom. This is one of the series of ceremonies planned over the next few days. Raisi, as foreign minister, and 7 others were killed on Sunday in a helicopter crash in northwestern Iran. The cause is under investigation. French President Emmanuel Macron is en route to New Caledonia tonight in an effort to quell unrest that has left at least 6 people dead. Hundreds of French troops are said to have made progress restoring order over the weekend. Riots erupted last week in the French territory over voting reform plans approved in Paris. Local leaders say the proposed changes will dilute the political influence of the indigenous Kanak people. With the local airports still closed to commercial flights, Australia and New Zealand were the first to use military transport to airlift dozens of stranded tourists today. More repatriation flights are expected in the coming days. The first internationally binding treaty aimed at regulating artificial intelligence has been adopted by the Council of Europe. Europe's AI Act sets out a legal framework that covers the entire life cycle of AI systems and addresses the risks they may pose. The aim is to ensure responsible use of AI that respects human rights, the rule of law, and democracy. The treaty could become a global benchmark for businesses and everyday life. Under the Act, the EU Commission could fine companies that breach the rules as much as 35 million euros.
Let's get this party started, or whatever.
Sound familiar? Next, why Scarlett Johansson is voicing her concern about a new ChatGPT system. In our post-truth era, it can be hard to tell fact from fiction, and artificial intelligence is accelerating that. Now, a sobering new assessment by Policy Horizons Canada, a federal think tank, ranks 35 global disruptions that could reshape Canada and the world. It consulted 500 stakeholders within and outside government and found the number 3 threat is that the emergency response system is overwhelmed. The second concern is biodiversity is lost and ecosystems collapse. And the number 1 threat, people cannot tell what is true and what is not. It says with the information ecosystem flooded with human and artificial intelligence-generated content, mis- and disinformation make it almost impossible to know what is fake or real. It is already happening. Actor Scarlett Johansson says OpenAI ripped off her voice for its newest version of ChatGPT, and she is furious. It sounds eerily like her, and as Mike Trelay reports, that technology is moving faster than any human or government can react.
Hey, let's have some fun. I'd like you to be super sarcastic. Everything you say from now on is just going to be dripping in sarcasm. How does that sound?
Oh, that sounds just amazing. Being sarcastic all the time isn't exhausting or anything.
ChatGPT maker OpenAI gave its ultra-realistic new assistant the name Sky, but all anybody heard was Scarlett.
Is that weird? You think I'm weird?
As in the actress Scarlett Johansson, who voiced the AI in the decade-old movie Her. She willingly took part in the movie, but when OpenAI asked her last year to be its voice, she declined, which she did again after she claimed they asked her last week. It all became a bit of a joke.
Oh, God. ChatGPT has released a new voice assistant.
But OpenAI insisted they used a voice actor, adding, to protect their privacy, we cannot share the names of our voice talents.
Do we believe that there's an actor out there?
I mean, who knows, right? There's no reason to think that they couldn't have found somebody that sounds an awful lot like her.
Human or not, Johansson's lawyers made sure Sky was taken down, her fears echoing concerns in the entertainment industry that AI could replace actors.
Should we be concerned with how human they're making it?
That's a great question. I mean, the number 1 rule in AI is to not try and anthropomorphize what you're dealing with, and yet researchers consistently kind of fall into the trap around it because of the way that AI is very different.
Yeah, it's different, but that line between human and AI,
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table,
is starting to fade.
It took us, 10, 12 years of experiencing the harms of social media before we thought, maybe we should regulate this. I think we're moving faster now with AI, but we have to keep up.
How? Perhaps AI could walk us through it.
And then exhale slowly.
Mike Trelay, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen, the real Donna for now. Tonight's Your Canada is Edmonton's Ice District, outside Rogers Place. That's where Oilers...
Tonight we have breaking news just as we come on the air tonight. The images coming in right now. The tornadoes touching down, the harrowing video. We'll show you in just a moment. Also this deadly turbulence slamming a passenger jet. Many passengers violently sent into the ceiling. The flight from London to Singapore, passenger possibly suffering a fatal heart attack. Many screaming in pain. Dozens of passengers and crew rushed to the hospital, including Americans. Some of the patients in critical condition tonight. The images inside the cabin, oxygen masks dangling over seats, injured passengers being treated on the tarmac. Also tonight, these horrific images just coming in, the reported tornadoes, and there are watches and warnings up at this hour across several states. The National Weather Service tonight calling it a particularly dangerous situation from Texas all the way up to Michigan tonight. Just in this evening, the Pentagon now confirming reports that Russia launched a counter-space weapon capable of attacking and possibly destroying U.S. and other satellites. And so Martha Rath is standing by with late reporting for us. Tonight, the criminal trial of Donald Trump. The defense resting its case without Donald Trump taking the stand. Tonight, when this now goes to the jury. The race for the White House, and this evening, Donald Trump's new comments about birth control. What he said when asked would he support restricting contraception. The Biden campaign outraged tonight their response. Tonight, the push to free 5 Americans being held in Turks and Caicos, each possibly facing at least 12 years in prison after ammunition was found in their luggage. What's being done to get them out? Will it work? Tonight, the headline involving Graceland. Is it done? Targeted for foreclosure when Elvis Presley's granddaughter is trying to do. The U.S. National Park and the tourist attacked by a grizzly bear. The death of Matthew Perry and the turn tonight in the investigation. And for the first time since Michael Jordan, Wilson creating a signature basketball for someone else. You can guess her name.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this.
Tonight, deadly turbulence.
It was awful screaming.
The terrifying moments in the sky. An international flight plunges, leaving passengers bloody and oxygen masks hanging. What we're learning about what exactly happened.
The type of damage that we see in this airplane is not typical of what you would see from just the turbulence encounter.
CBS Evening News starts now. Truly a nightmare at 37,000 feet on a flight from London. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. This was the scene on board a Singapore Airlines plane. Debris strewn everywhere, dents in the overhead compartments after unbuckled people slammed into them during severe turbulence on the way to Singapore. One person is dead, dozens are injured. Tonight, 7 are in critical condition. The chaos lasted less than 2 minutes, forcing the pilots to make an emergency landing in Bangkok. CBS's Chris Van Cleve has more on what happened from passengers who experienced it.
Passengers describe a sudden drop during a meal service that left passengers bloodied, overhead bins and oxygen masks dangling, dented ceilings, and debris everywhere.
During a few seconds of the plane dropping, there was an awful screaming.
It happened about 10 hours into Singapore Airlines Flight 321 as it approached Thailand on the trip from London to Singapore. There were storms in the area when preliminary flight data show the plane appeared to encounter a sudden turbulent event lasting about a minute. It launched unbelted passengers and crew into the ceiling, leaving dozens injured and a 73-year-old British man dead of a possible heart attack. A line of ambulances met the Boeing 777-300 after an emergency landing in Bangkok.
The plane just suddenly dropped. The thing I remember the most was just seeing objects and things flying through the air. There was a poor elderly lady in an awful crash, and her head covered in blood.
Among the 211 passengers and 18 crew on board, at least 4 Americans. One is said to be among the injured. 30 people were taken to the hospital, according to the airline, 7 in critical condition.
It's extremely rare to have a turbulence event result in fatalities.
Former NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt.
What I would call this right now is an in-flight upset, whether that is a result of atmospheric turbulence or whether it's the result of something else.
Too early to know for sure.
Too early to know for sure at this point.
Injuries from turbulence are rare. The FAA says between 2009 and 2022 in the U.S., there were 163 reported. Nearly 80% were to airline crew. The best thing you can do to protect yourself and stay safe is wear that seatbelt, Nora.
Frightening. Chris Van Cleve, thank you. Well, now to some breaking news with a new round of severe weather hammering the heartland. At this hour, there have been at least a dozen reports of tornadoes across Iowa, with several states under tornado watches through the night. CBS's Roxana Saberi is in Davenport, Iowa tonight.
Tonight, a dangerous tornado outbreak in Iowa, with at least a dozen reports of twisters so far today. This video was captured by a tornado chaser in Adams County, Iowa, about 100 miles southwest of Des Moines. You can see a hull ripped to shreds, debris swirling, and the devastating aftermath. The tornado took down several wind turbines, setting off a massive fire, sending thick black smoke billowing into the air. Forecasters are predicting many more tornadoes will hit the Midwest tonight, including after dark, the most dangerous time when people are asleep and may not hear warnings. And you can see the wind is picking up here in Davenport, Iowa. The storms are heading straight toward us, some moving as fast as 70 miles per hour. We're under a tornado watch until 9 local time tonight. And for details on this dangerous situation and what people can expect, I want to bring in meteorologist Chris Bruin from our partners at the Weather Channel. Chris?
Yeah, that's a particularly dangerous situation, and it's a notable threat here for eastern Iowa and other parts of the Midwest. The winds we already have in the blue sky that we've seen at times today, it just shows you how dangerous the environment is in the atmosphere as the storms work this direction. So that tells us they're going to intensify. They will likely produce more destructive tornadoes. So you want to take this threat very seriously. Let's take a look at the timing. You can see what it already looks like. We've got watches stretched all the way down into parts of Missouri and Arkansas, but here in Iowa, this seems to be the bulk of where we'll see the worst conditions. That's where torque content are the highest. Also to southwest Wisconsin and southern parts of Minnesota, torque content of 7. That's a notable threat here. The storms will move through quickly, and once they clear you, the threat is done and we will clear out very nicely. But the problems don't stop there. Damaging winds could exceed into Chicago and then all the way down into the mid-south. Come tomorrow, there's a look at our threat from Texas to Arkansas, and you can see the timing will continue through the afternoon and into tomorrow night, even early Thursday morning. So we have a long 48 hours to go, Nora.
Important information. Chris Bruin and Roxana Saberi, thank you so much. Well, tonight the defense rests in Donald Trump's so-called hush money trial, and closing arguments are expected to start next week. But it's a video posted to Trump's social media account during court yesterday that President Biden is calling attention to. It includes references to a unified Reich. That is a term that is largely associated with Hitler's regime in Nazi Germany. Biden's campaign says it's, quote, a pattern of the former president's praise for dictators and echoing anti-Semitic tropes. CBS's Robert Costa has new reporting tonight.
Former President Trump addressed reporters today outside of the courtroom, but offered no comment on the incendiary, controversial video posted to his social media account.
What happens after Donald Trump wins?
The video showed hypothetical headlines of an imagined Trump victory this fall, with one asking what's next for America, and 3 times suggesting the creation of a unified Reich, a term widely associated with Nazi Germany. President Biden released this campaign video response.
A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power.
This kind of rhetoric is unsurprising coming from the former president, and it is appalling. And we got to tell him who we are.
It's not the first time Trump has used rhetoric prompting outrage for its echoes of hateful extremists. He said of immigrants,
they're poisoning the blood of our country.
And of his political opponents using language some historians say is akin to Nazi propaganda.
And the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
Trump's words on the trail have grown increasingly charged with visceral nationalistic statements. In Minnesota on Friday, Trump told supporters the country was theirs.
This is not a nation that belongs to them. This is a nation that totally belongs to you. It belongs to you. This is your home. This is your heritage.
Trump has said if he wins in November, he'd be a dictator on day 1 only. On Saturday at the NRA convention, he mused about the possibility of staying on for a 3rd term.
You know, FDR, 16 years, almost 16 years. He was 4-term. I don't know. Are we going to be considered 3-term or 2-term?
The Trump campaign has taken down the video and blamed a, quote, junior staffer for sharing the material, which was first published elsewhere. Nora.
Robert Costa, thank you very much. Now to the battleground state of Arizona. 11 of Donald Trump's allies, including Rudy Giuliani, pleaded not guilty in an Arizona court for allegedly trying to keep Trump in power after he lost the 2020 election. The former president himself is not charged in this alleged fake elector scheme, but he is unindicted co-conspirator number 1. CBS's Ed O'Keefe reports from Phoenix.
Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani.
The former New York City mayor phoned in to a Phoenix courtroom today to face charges of trying to overturn results of the 2020 presidential elections.
I do consider this indictment a complete embarrassment to the American legal system.
Prosecutors finally served a subpoena to the mayor Friday night after his 80th birthday party in Florida, they say after weeks of trying to find him. He now has to pay a $10,000 bond and show up in Arizona for processing in the next 30 days. Giuliani is one of 18 charged by Arizona's Democratic Attorney General with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, a group including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former Trump attorney John Eastman, and the former head of Arizona's GOP, Kelly Ward, and her husband, Michael. Their attorney says they committed no crime.
In the view of your clients, it was protest.
Yes, absolutely. Peaceable protests, which is constitutional, freedom of speech.
At least 5 states are investigating or prosecuting so-called fake electors who tried pressuring then Vice President Mike Pence to not certify the Electoral College count. Trump isn't charged in Arizona, but he is in Georgia. And in an interview today with CBS News Pittsburgh, he says he's concerned with how elections will be conducted in battleground Pennsylvania.
We should go to all paper ballots. We should have one-day voting, one-day election, and just do it properly, and voter ID.
Disputes about election results in battleground states aren't going away. Just last week in tiny Delta County, Michigan, a board of canvassers initially refused to certify the results of a county commission race. They were pushed by election conspiracy activists questioning the reliability of voting machines. The local board eventually approved the results under pressure from state officials.
The defendants in this case aren't scheduled to go on trial until mid-October at the earliest, meaning another legal battle over the 2020 elections isn't likely to be resolved until after the 2024 contest. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much. A new controversy tonight in the world of artificial intelligence, as one of Hollywood's biggest movie stars says her voice was copied without her consent by one of the most powerful AI companies. Actress Scarlett Johansson claims OpenAI's ChatGPT mimicked her voice for its latest personal assistant program. CBS's Jolene Kent has the tale of AI imitating art, imitating life.
Scarlett Johansson says she was shocked and angered when she heard a voice which sounded an awful lot like her.
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Johansson is calling out OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, saying the company's new AI voice, Sky, sounded eerily similar to the virtual assistant she played in the movie Her.
I want to learn everything about everything.
This is Sky.
Once upon a time, in a world not too different from ours,
Johansson claims Altman asked her to participate twice, saying he felt my voice would be comforting to people, but she declined the offer. NPR's Bobby Allen broke the story after interviewing OpenAI CTO Mira Murati.
I said, hey, did you guys base this voice off of Scarlett Johansson? And she said, really? I don't even know what that voice sounds like. Then we reach out to Scarlett Johansson and she says, my own family thought it was me.
Last year, Altman said Her is his favorite film.
That was incredibly prophetic.
And on the day of the AI voice launch, he tweeted the word Her. He now says, out of respect for Ms. Johansson, we have paused using Sky's voice in our products. We are sorry to Ms. Johansson that we didn't communicate better. This comes at a time when the use of AI in Hollywood remains a major concern.
This is OpenAI's business model. They troll the entire internet. For every image, they vacuum it up and make many, many, many millions of dollars off of this. Who isn't getting paid? The artist.
And Jolene Kent joins us now, and this isn't the first accusation against AI like this, right?
That's right. OpenAI has been sued by the New York Times, the Authors Guild of America, including John Grisham and David Baldacci, along with various actors and artists. This Scarlett Johansson case is really just the tip of the iceberg. It's about permission to use content and what OpenAI is doing with it, Nora.
Future to come, or it's here. Jolene
It's
Kent,
here.
thank you. Special meals for people on weight loss injectables are coming to a grocery store near you. What's in them and how much they'll cost? That's next. Nestle is cashing in on the weight loss drug craze. The company says it's launching a brand of smaller portion, high-protein frozen meals specifically created for people taking drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. The food line, called Vital Pursuit, will be rolled out later this year with frozen pizzas and pastas that will sell for $5 each. Another special honor has bounced Caitlin Clark's way. The WNBA rookie sensation is now the first athlete since Michael Jordan to have a signature basketball with Wilson Sporting Goods. She's also the first female athlete ever to have her own signature ball with the brand. The company broke the news today, unveiling 3 limited edition basketballs, celebrating Clark's status as a record-setting athlete and cultural icon. Clark also has endorsement deals with Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm. My guess is those basketballs will be popular. Eye on America is next with a hidden danger facing firefighters across the country, their own gear. Tonight, we begin a new era for one of our enduring franchises. 4 times a week, Eye on America will offer in-depth reporting on the news that is shaping our culture and our country. We begin with a look at a threat facing firefighters nationwide. San Francisco could soon become the first city in the U.S. to ban firefighting gear made with so-called forever chemicals, suspected carcinogens known as PFAS. In tonight's Eye on America, Mark Strassman reports from Ohio, where many firefighters worry about their gear and foam more than about smoke and flames.
In small-town Bellbrook, Ohio, firefighter Jay Leach feels burned.
Most firefighters that got in this job knew it's an inherited risk, but we never knew that the gear and the equipment that we're using is killing us.
Inside Fire Station 22, Lieutenant Leach helped remove buckets of firefighting foam. It's called AFFF, undeniably effective, but laced with PFAS, so-called forever chemicals now linked to various cancers, especially among firefighters.
Cancer caused 72% of active-duty firefighter deaths last year, according to the International Association of Firefighters. A separate study showed smoke inhalation causes 4% of active-duty firefighter deaths.
A safer foam now exists, and 21 states have introduced policies that limit the use of AFFF firefighting foam. But for Jay Leach, cancer's heartache has no limits.
You said you want to show me something. I do. I keep my wife with me in my helmet. There's a picture of her in there.
Oh, yeah. So you wear that whenever you go on call?
His wife Tracy was a firefighter for 25 years. Her diagnosis in 2017, breast cancer, despite no family history of cancer.
It pretty much ravaged her body. And then December of 2022, she was diagnosed terminally. And 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, she passed away.
You can't conclusively prove it, correct, but in your gut.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe that PFAS caused my wife's cancer.
In a statement, the American Chemistry Council, an industry group, said it supports limits on using AFFF, adding, all PFAS are not the same. It is not scientifically accurate or appropriate to group them together when considering safety risks. But for Jay Leach, this moment was cathartic, dropping off buckets of AFFF for destruction. Tens of thousands of gallons of it sit in fire stations across America. Ohio is the first state committed to destroying all of it. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine.
This gives us an alternative.
Sitting there, which does nobody any good.
Does no one any good. You know, it might leak out. You know, it's a danger whenever you have a product like that.
Another worry. PFAS have been inside firefighting gear for decades. PFAS help repel water and contaminants, but put on this gear and you're wrapping yourself inside suspected carcinogens.
We sweat, our pores open up, and the forever chemicals can go in our body.
19 years into this job. Are you more scared of fires or are you more scared of cancer?
Cancer. Absolutely. I love the job, but at the end of the day, I sit and think, is it worth it?
They realize the irony, scared of what's supposed to protect them. For Eye on America, Mark Strassman, Bellbrook, Ohio.
What a story. And next, the story of a special college graduation ceremony that's all in the family. That's next. Finally, tonight's Heart of America. It's graduation season and a time to celebrate the hard work of America's students. But for Ronald Yancey, it's a reminder of personal perseverance. Nearly 6 decades ago, he became the first black graduate at Georgia Tech, paving the way for other students of color. Earlier this month, he presented a diploma and a hug to one of those students, his granddaughter, Deanna. She graduated with a master's in electrical and computer engineering, the very same field as her grandfather.
I get the best of both worlds of not only having Ronald Yancey, the first black graduate, hand me my diploma, but also the fact that I get to have my grandfather hand me my diploma.
There are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. Deanna made this happen.
I agree. Ronald and Deanna Yancey, they are tonight's Heart of America. And congratulations to all the graduates. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.
Thank you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Mimi Goodman. In Gaza, Israeli air attacks in the north of the Gaza Strip have killed at least 18 Palestinians in Jabalia and Beit Lahia. Airstrikes also killed at least 5 people today in the southern city of Rafah. The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 85 Palestinians have been killed over the past day, with another 228 wounded. The continued Israeli attacks come a day after the International Criminal Court announced it's seeking arrest warrants for alleged war crimes committed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and 3 leaders of Hamas. President Biden condemned the move by the ICC Monday as he spoke at a White House event for Jewish American Heritage Month.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israel. Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. And it's clear. Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection.
Republicans say they're considering sanctions against the International Criminal Court. Meanwhile, independent Senator Bernie Sanders backed the actions by the ICC, saying, quote, it's imperative the global community uphold international law. Without these standards of decency and morality, this planet may rapidly descend into anarchy, never-ending wars, and barbarism, he said. International reactions to the news has been mixed. France, a close ally of Israel, said it supports the ICC's, quote, independence and the fight against impunity in all situations, unquote. Palestinian officials have welcomed the possible arrest warrants while condemning the double standards against Palestinians resisting Israeli occupation. Displaced Palestinians in Rafah weighed in on the decision.
My opinion about the ICC decision is that they've equated the victim with the executioner. They made victim and executioner equal. The criminal, Netanyahu and Gantz, who have killed the people of Palestine for more than 75 years, equal to the Palestinians who have resisted and demanded their rights. The homeland is our right, and we must demand our right.
Meanwhile, The Guardian is reporting Israeli soldiers have been tipping off extremist settlers on the location of aid trucks headed to Gaza, allowing far-right groups to block and vandalize the humanitarian convoys. Deadly Israeli raids continue in the occupied West Bank. At least 7 Palestinians were killed today after Israeli soldiers stormed the city of Jenin again early in the morning. Among the victims were a teacher and a doctor who were on their way to work, and at least 1 young student who was shot while riding his bike to school. About a dozen others have been reported injured, including a journalist. Schools in Jenin have been evacuated. Israeli forces also made 15 arrests across from Ramallah, Nablus, and Tubas, as well as in occupied East Jerusalem. Israel's detained over 8,800 Palestinians since October 7th. A group of New York lawmakers has introduced a measure that would ban New York nonprofits from using tax-deductible donations to fund Israeli settlers and Israeli military units in Gaza and the West Bank. The Not on Our Dime Act would also prohibit organizations from aiding and abetting the resettling of Gaza or supporting Israeli military actions that violate international law. The legislation was first introduced last year by New York Assembly member Zohran Mamdani and State Senator Jabari Brisport. U.S. Congressmember Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez spoke in favor of the bill at a rally Monday. Over 150 Yale students staged a walkout Monday during their graduation ceremony. Some students wore red gloves to symbolize blood as they demand the Ivy League school divest from Israel. Yale students and faculty also carried signs with the words, "Drop the charges and protect free speech," in defense of the 45 protesters arrested during the police crackdown on Yale. Meanwhile, here in New York, the New School Gaza Solidarity Encampment announced it reached a deal with the University Board of Trustees to hold a vote on divestment by June 14th. The New School has been home to the country's first faculty encampment. In New York State, students at Bard announced all of their demands around investments and transparency have been met days after escalating their protests. The activists said, despite the victory, quote, there's no such thing as winning in the midst of a genocide, unquote. In Iran, funeral ceremonies have begun for Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash Sunday, along with the Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian and several other Iranian officials and crew. Thousands of mourners gathered today in the city of Tabriz for a procession. Other ceremonies are planned in the coming days, including tomorrow in Tehran. Raisi's burial is set to take place Thursday in his home city of Rashad. Iranian state media said the crash was caused by a, quote, technical failure. French President Emmanuel Macron is heading to New Caledonia and sending in more troops as tensions continue to rise in the Pacific archipelago. Australia and New Zealand are evacuating their citizens. 6 people have been killed in recent clashes. The crisis was triggered after France moved to allow French residents who've lived in New Caledonia for 10 years to vote in provincial elections. Some 40% of the population of New Caledonia is Kanak, but the island has been under French rule since its colonization in the 19th century. Kanak activist Vero Chulue says France is bringing civil war back to New Caledonia.
Not only the Kanak, we have some Polynesian people from Vanuatu here who lives here, Fiji, and some people from France as well. They are helping Kanak people, not only the Kanak people, not only the political independence party here, everyone here. But it's really hard because we are really scared about the police, the French soldiers, and we are scared about the anti-Kanak militant terrorist group.
In Greece, the trial is opening for 9 Egyptian men accused of smuggling migrants in the Pylos shipwreck that killed some 600 people in June last year. But the accused men say they're being scapegoated and are themselves victims. Human Rights Watch is warning the trial risks overlooking the criminal responsibility of Greek authorities. The majority of victims of the shipwreck were from Pakistan. Others were from Syria and Egypt. This is survivor Inzamam Makbul speaking from Athens Monday.
I can't give me justice. All people died. Pakistani 400 people, only 12 people rescued. All day families in Pakistan, people died in sea. All day call in mother, father, sister and wife. Call me. Where is my husband? Where is my brother? Where is my cousin? Where is tell me. What we tell?
Back in New York, prosecutors rested their case Monday in Donald Trump's criminal hush money in 2016 election interference trial. Trump's lawyers called witness Robert Costello. He's an attorney who's accused Michael Cohen of lying, but his testimony soon devolved after he complained about prosecutors' objections, as well as the judge, leading Judge Juan Merchan to reprimand him and briefly clear the courtroom. At one point, Judge Merchan asked Costello, quote, "Are you staring me down right now?" Meanwhile, Cohen admitted under questioning by the defense that he stole $60,000 of Trump Organization money to make up for a cut to his annual bonus in 2016. In other Trump news, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, 2 key figures in Georgia's sweeping racketeering case against Trump, are both on the ballot today as Georgians head to the polls for state primaries. In more related news, Rudy Giuliani was served Friday with notice of his indictment in Arizona's 2020 election subversion case. Agents from Arizona's Attorney General's office served Giuliani the papers at his 80th birthday party in Palm Beach, Florida, reportedly just after guests sang him happy birthday. And Larry Bensky, award-winning reporter and veteran KPFA radio broadcaster, died Sunday at the age of 87. Bensky was the national affairs correspondent for Pacifica Radio from 1987 to 98, notably covering the 1987 Iran-Contra hearings and the 9/11 Commission hearings, among other historical events. Larry Bensky also hosted KPFA's public affairs show Sunday Salon and later the classical music show Piano. He also wrote for various publications, including The Nation, and was a professor. In this KPFA clip, Bensky reflects on why he chose the career of journalism.
I thought that bringing people information about things would stir things up. It's not that bringing people information automatically brings a cure to humanity's ills. We wouldn't have so many ills. It's that if you don't do it, it's certainly not going to change. So that's how I became what I think of as an activist journalist.
Larry Bensky was also one of the original co-hosts of Democracy Now! In 1996. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is fun.
We are moving to the phase of pure politics now because we're going to learn whether or not Donald Trump is going to run as the Republican nominee for president as a convicted. 12 people are now going to tell us the answers to the biggest questions we have about the state of this presidential race so far.
Joining me now, Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt, who attended the Trump trial today. Senator, what's your reaction to what you witnessed in the courthouse? I mean, it looks like most of the big issues in this jury instructions back and forth went for the prosecution. The judge ruled in favor of the prosecution on key issues that go to the heart of this matter of what the underlying crime really is.
Well, it was kind of a surreal experience, Laura, sitting in that courtroom in the front row today, watching the proceedings, and the defense ultimately resting in that this is America. This is the United States of America. We believe in something called American exceptionalism. We're an exception to history in that we believe in individual rights and we believe in justice, and Lady Justice is blind. That is not what's going on right now in New York. I think what you're seeing is, to your point earlier, this is a Soviet-style show trial, and that's it, right? This is meant, and these charges were brought, people were running on doing this to try to interfere with the election and to quote-unquote get Trump. And I think it's truly unprecedented. We talk about things being unprecedented all the time. This truly is unprecedented, that essentially the Democrats are trying to take out their political opponent who's leading in the polls, was the 45th president, likely to be the 47th president. This is the stuff, again, that our State Department will be warning us about if it were happening in other countries. It's happening in the United States of America. So I think the American people recognize this, and I don't think this election anymore, Laura, is just about the candidates. It's about a cause. It's about America and the kind of country we're going to be.
Now, the media, this is one of my favorite moments of today, are claiming that people like you, Senator Schmidt, and others who are attending this trial and going out and coming on shows like The Angle are helping to kind of backdoor a violation of the gag order for Trump. Watch.
NBC reporting the coordination and organization between Trump and those supporters has stoked questions about whether the remarks by the cast of Republicans amount to a violation of Trump's gag order.
There's no doubt this is a violation of the gag order. The prosecutors could try to call some witnesses on it. They could do a sideshow on it. And I have no doubt they'd be able to prove up a violation of the gag order.
Senator, real quick.
Yeah, listen, as a former prosecutor and attorney general, gag orders are typically meant to protect defendants. This is the same crowd, Laura, that doesn't believe in the First Amendment. They try to censor speech. They try to quell dissent. That's all they're doing here, and I'm going to continue to speak out. It's why I was there today, to stand by President Trump and the rule of law.
Okay, a new court filing unsealed today, Senator. This just in provided a behind-the-scenes look at how federal agents prepared for and executed the raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. That was back in August of 22, including deadly force being within the mission's guidelines. Senator,
I mean,
they were actually thinking of using deadly force, or it's on the table that might be necessary at Mar-a-Lago?
If you ever needed any more evidence about the two tiers of justice, you compare this authorization of deadly force for the former president versus essentially the kid gloves they put on for Joe Biden, who had classified materials from his Senate days in a garage where Hunter Biden shares, who's compromised by foreign governments, right? They treated these very differently. This is just sort of like the explanation.
Not just that. Senator, they gave a heads up to the lawyer was allowed to go, the White House lawyer was allowed to go to the garage and kind of check out the lay of the land first, right? Isn't that how it went down? So it was deadly force. Okay.
Yeah.
That really, it's really
crazy. I mean, honestly, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, something actually could have gone down, I guess, at Mar-a-Lago, beyond just looking for the documents. Senator, try not to violate any gag orders surreptitiously.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
In Washington, with the breaking news special report, Donald Trump on trial, just one step away from the jury getting the case, just as soon as they hammer out jury instructions, with a long, super technical, but super important stretch to close out the day, just 1 week now from closing arguments. Mr. Trump reversing himself and deciding not to testify. You see him here, he is speaking live in the hallway in court. He hasn't said so far why he didn't testify, but his son, Don Jr., made the case for him.
You're going to make a report. There's nothing more, nothing less. There's absolutely no reason to justify that whatsoever.
We'll check that in a second, but this decision means we finish this stage of the trial with 16 days of testimony. 22 total witnesses, 2 from Mr. Trump's defense team, the rest for the prosecution. And the last one for the defense, Robert Costello, the former legal advisor to Michael Cohen, staying sassy in the courtroom again, rolling his eyes at one point as prosecutors tried to attack his credibility, accusing him of trying to intimidate Cohen. Costello calling that claim ridiculous. Still, most of the day, most of the afternoon, boy, we spent it deep in the weeds. The judge was working with both sides to try to hash out jury instructions. And let's be real, not spicy, not dramatic. So important because it lays out exactly how the jury should approach these historic 34 felony charges that Mr. Trump pleaded not guilty to. Big question now, the timeline. Closing arguments up next Tuesday. That is the expectation here. And the jury may get this case either late that day or more likely the day after. But in between, of course, is the long Memorial Day weekend. Maybe relaxing for most of us, perhaps less so for those 12 everyday New Yorkers, for that teacher, salesman, speech therapist, and more. Because they're going to have a big question hanging over them for the holiday. Will you vote to convict a former president? For the next 20 minutes, we're wrapping up this whole trial with a look at that big question that hangs over it. What comes next? With our team of reporters and legal and political experts here to break it all down. I want to start with Rahima Ellis outside the courthouse. So importantly, Rahima, where did we land on the jury instructions? The last words that the jury will hear from the judge, from the court, before they go behind closed doors to hash this thing out.
Yeah, I was inside the courtroom in the courthouse in the overflow room, and you gave the adjectives correctly. Let me add a couple more. Tedious, complicated, but extremely crucial.
He's unlikely to go to prison or anything like that before the election, and certainly not going to inhibit him from running. But it definitely could make a big impact, on the race.
Michael Russell, Suzanne Craig, thanks to both of you for being with us here during our special coverage of Donald Trump's first criminal trial. Thank you. We've got a lot of other big headlines tonight. We're going to catch you up on all of it when we pick up our regular programming right after the break. We are coming on the air with multiple tornadoes touching down in Iowa as we speak. Violent storms rocking the Midwest. Torrential rain coming down in other parts of the country. We've got to look tonight at just how bad things could get. Plus, one person dead after extreme turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. This usually doesn't happen, so how dangerous was this moment? We're going to explain how this went down. Then the far-right group traveling across the country, pushing for laws that would put women behind bars for getting an abortion. How they're taking things into their own hands in tonight's original. And the world's biggest food company launching a new line aimed at profiting from people taking weight loss drugs. That's coming out a little later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and as we're coming on the air, we are watching tornadoes touching down in Iowa right now. I want to show you one near
Globe. The world today, from Monday to Thursday, here on France 24.
Following more than a week of violent unrest in New Caledonia, President Macron heads to the overseas French territory where indigenous people are angry over voting reforms. France 24's team follows pro-peace demonstrators in Israel who've been helping to protect Gaza-bound aid convoys, the lorries and their drivers having been recently attacked by radicalized Israeli settlers. And the defense rests its case at Donald Trump's hush money trial, without the former president taking to the stand. Jury deliberations will follow next week's closing arguments. Those of you just joining us, welcome to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, the French president is on his way to the overseas territory of New Caledonia. The epic 17,000-kilometre trip to the other side of the world is expected to take him more than 24 hours and comes after more than a week of deadly unrest sparked by election reforms. The indigenous Kanak people, many of whom seek independence from France, say that changes will see their representation diminished. Lauren Berstecker has the latest.
Hoping to appease tensions after a week-long political crisis, Emmanuel Macron traveled to New Caledonia on Tuesday in a bid to restore order to the riot-hit territory. Speaking at the National Assembly, which held a minute's silence to honor those who lost their lives in the violence, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal was confident the president's visit would help usher in a return to calm.
He will hold talks with all actors of New Caledonian society, political parties, civil society actors, young people, economic actors, and indigenous groups. The aim is to be by their side and to start laying groundwork to rebuild.
Violence erupted last week after French MPs approved a bill to change New Caledonia's electoral laws. It would allow residents who've lived in the territory for at least 10 years to vote in provincial elections, a change the indigenous Kanak people say will further erode their rights. After a week of riots that saw hundreds of businesses pillaged and several people killed, calm slowly returned on Tuesday, with French military and police continuing to clear out roadblocks. But some Kanak activists vowed they would keep protesting until the bill was scrapped.
We won't give up until they withdraw the text. No, we won't give up. Even if we have to die for it, we'll stay here on the roadblocks.
Pro-independence leaders have blamed the riots on Macron and accused him of forcing the unpopular reform through parliament. Some took to social media on Tuesday to criticize the president's visit and warned it could end up adding more fuel to the fire.
Moving on now to Israel, where violent attacks on humanitarian convoys are becoming ever more frequent. Last week, images shocked viewers worldwide that showed radicalized Israeli settlers destroying the food supplies intended for Palestinians in Gaza. Many in Israel oppose this behavior, however, and since Sunday, pro-peace demonstrators have been taking turns to stand guard and protect the lorries and their drivers. France 24's team sent this report.
At this checkpoint between Israel and the West Bank, several dozen Israeli activists have gathered to protect the aid convoys headed for Gaza.
The drivers are scared and worried because people are targeting them on the road. In Jerusalem, for instance, one driver has been in hospital for 2 days. There were 20 or 30 people here yesterday. 2 police officers were deployed here as a meaningless gesture. They just told people to move. If they had wanted to actually stop them, they could have. They know how to repress protests, but no, they let them do it.
These Israeli settlers create a human barricade to prevent the aid lorries from getting through. Some have a record of acts of violence that are taken away by the police, while activists from the Standing Together movement try to ensure there is a path for the convoys, movements with radically different views.
We came here today to create a kind of a corridor of dignity so that all the trucks can get through and they don't have to face harm. So we're here to make sure that the police do their job. These are just kids, they're afraid.
They were the ones who raped and murdered us on the 7th of October. We've come here today to block the aid so it doesn't reach them because we think help should go 2 ways. If we give them the humanitarian aid, they should free the hostages.
In a society still reeling from the 7th of October, these radicalised teenagers enjoy some support. Pro-peace activists like Alan Lee Green, though, are trying to change Israeli attitudes and draw attention to the risk of famine in Gaza.
I cannot promise that we will win, but we're doing whatever we can to make sure that people have the option to choose the path of ending the occupation, the path of ending the war, unless we will be able to present this option. The only way will be the way of the extreme government that sends youth to here to block the aid while, doing what they're doing in Gaza.
Today, the lorries can continue on their way. About 100 kilometres to go before they reach the south of Gaza, where they will be inspected by the Israeli army before they finally reach the Palestinian population.
Next, Israeli allies that recognise the authority of the International Criminal Court have found themselves in a tough position after its chief prosecutor issued arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister and Defence Minister alongside the leaders of Hamas for their respective parts in the Gaza war. Well, Israel wants them to publicly denounce the move.
As Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defence Minister Yoav Gallant find themselves in the International Criminal Court sites for war crimes and crimes against humanity, Israel has called on its allies to rally against the court.
You should outright condemn this step. Make sure the ICC understands where you stand. Oppose the prosecutor's decision and declare that even if warrants are issued, you do not intend to enforce them.
Israel's #1 ally leapt to its defence.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. And it's clear. Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection.
Israel and the US are conspicuous by their absence in the list of 124 countries recognising the authority of the ICC, unlike the vast majority of their European allies, who now find their loyalty tested to a court that has up until now prosecuted overwhelmingly African leaders and never yet officials from a Western-aligned democracy.
The International Criminal Court, in over 20 years of existence, has never indicted a Western official. In fact, no international tribunal since Nuremberg has done so.
France has outright welcomed the move.
France supports the International Criminal Court, its independence, and the fight against impunity in all situations.
Emphasising French concern over a lack of respect for international law in the Gaza Strip, while Germany is walking a thin line between the two, emphasising the country's continued respect for the ICC's independence, Israel's right to self-defence, as well as Israel's duty to respect international humanitarian law, while also reiterating its condemnation of Hamas. It's now up to a panel of 3 judges to assess whether to issue the warrants, and if they do, international law will require any ICC member state to arrest the 2 men if they enter their territories, a state of affairs likely to further isolate Israel and its leadership.
Moving on now, and vast crowds have turned out in Tehran to pay their respects to the late Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, as funeral ceremonies were held at the Grand Mosalla Mosque. He was killed in a helicopter crash in bad weather near the Azerbaijan border alongside his foreign minister and 6 others. Their caskets were brought together and taken to a stage at the mosque where people offered prayers. Russia's military has begun drills involving tactical nuclear weapons in an apparent warning to the West about the level of support it's giving to Ukraine. It comes after the French president refused to rule out sending in troops, and Britain said Kyiv would be able to use its long-range weapons to target Russia. Next to a rift between far-right French and German parties in the European Parliament, the head of France's National Rally, Jordan Bardella, has decided to no longer sit with AfD deputies after controversial comments made by its leader.
They were the 2 core members of the far-right Identity and Democracy group in the European Parliament. But after 5 years of collaboration, the French National Rally has lost patience with its German ally. Party head Jordan Bardella said he would no longer sit with AfD in Brussels after the head of the far-right party, Maximilian Krah, claimed in an interview that members of Hitler's SS paramilitary force were not automatically criminals.
AfD, which we've been working with in the European Parliament for 5 years, has crossed what I see as red lines.
It was the latest in a string of controversies surrounding the far-right Alternative for Germany. Earlier this month, Maximilian Krah saw his Brussels office raided as part of a probe into one of his aides, suspected of spying for China. And last week, a German court ruled that AfD would be kept under surveillance as a potentially extremist party. A slew of scandals that contrast with the National Rally's attempts to tone down its radical rhetoric in recent years. Both parties are currently riding high in the polls, with the French far-right group expected to beat Emmanuel Macron's centrist party in next month's European election. Bardella, who took over from Marine Le Pen as National Rally leader in 2022, said he would look to build new alliances after the vote.
Now to New York, where the defense has rested its case in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Former U.S. President and presumptive Republican nominee, the first to face criminal charges, is accused of falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments to a porn star. Closing arguments are expected next week as Trump faces the possibility of jail.
Trump left his criminal trial on Tuesday without taking the witness stand to defend himself. That was always the expectation of legal experts, but the former president had said repeatedly he was eager to testify. Earlier in the day, outside court, Trump repeated familiar talking points, taking aim at the judge.
New York is going on trial itself. The whole world is watching to see what's happening. And you can't use conflicted judges. This is a conflicted judge.
In the end, the defense called just 2 witnesses, a legal analyst and Robert Costello, a former legal advisor to Michael Cohen, the prosecution's key witness. With Costello, the defense tried to poke holes in Cohen's credibility, which is crucial to the prosecution's case. A convicted felon himself, on his final day of testimony, Cohen admitted to stealing thousands of dollars from the Trump organization. And as both sides prepare closing arguments, the result ultimately relies on whether the jury believes Cohen, the only one who directly connects his former boss to the alleged 34 felonies of falsifying business records, linked to a hush money payment to the porn star Stormy Daniels in the run-up to the 2016 election. Daniels claims she had a sexual relationship with Trump in 2006, accusations Trump denies. During the trial, Judge Juan Merchan found the former president in contempt of court for violating a gag order at least 10 times, even threatening Trump with jail time for speaking publicly about witnesses and others involved in the case. Since, Trump has brought in a parade of surrogates who have served as his mouthpiece outside of court, including his son, Don Jr.
The star witness in this case is a 9 times convicted liar, and now an admitted thief.
If convicted, the former president faces probation, or as much as 4 years in prison. Closing arguments are scheduled to begin this Tuesday, with court off for the Memorial Day holiday.
131 passengers and 12 crew who'd been aboard a Singapore Airlines flight hit by severe turbulence have now made it to Singapore aboard a relief flight. Their original plane forced to divert to Bangkok after the incident left dozens of people injured, and one 73-year-old British man died on board from a suspected heart attack. 211 passengers and 18 crew had been on that original flight. They hit turbulence so bad that anyone not buckled up wearing a seatbelt was slammed into the plane's ceiling. With more troubles for the US aviation giant Boeing as NASA suspended the crewed flight of its Starliner capsule indefinitely, while engineers spend more time investigating the source of a helium leak. The first launch of the spaceship to the International Space Station was supposed to take place on May the 14th, but it's now been pushed back several times due to technical difficulties. That's all for this edition. Stay tuned for more world news on France 24.
Hello and welcome, I'm Clarisse Fortuné and you're watching Eye on Africa. In the headlines, Sudan is on the brink of famine, and after more than a year of conflict, people struggle to get access to medical facilities. Every child should go to school. That's the Gambia's ambition to make education accessible to all. Zero out-of-school children program will help families in need. And we'll go to Senegal, where the new government is trying to save the capital's coastline by suspending a wave of development projects. In Sudan, the unprecedented crisis continues to unfold, compelling near 7 million people to flee the over 1 year.
Today, more than 30 years jail for a man who stabbed his girlfriend to death in front of her 10-year-old daughter in Melbourne.
Copying our most expensive designer gowns and doing it extremely well.
I want a career in fashion. Today, more than 30 years jail for a man who stabbed his girlfriend to death in front of her 10-year-old daughter in Melbourne.
I saw people from across the aisle just like going completely horizontal, hitting the ceiling.
Shaken passengers describe the moment a Singapore Airlines plane hit severe turbulence. One man is dead and dozens of people are injured. More evacuation flights heading to riot-hit New Caledonia to bring back dozens of stranded Australians. And the federal government bans replicas of the diabetes and weight loss drug Ozempic. Welcome to ABC News. I'm Ross Childs. We begin in Melbourne, where a man has been jailed for 31 years for stabbing his girlfriend to death in front of her 10-year-old daughter last year. Sven Lindemann killed Monique Lezak in a jealous rage because he was angry she wanted to leave him for another man. Supreme Court Judge Elizabeth Hollingworth called Lindemann's actions the most extreme form of family violence, and she did not accept that he was genuinely remorseful. Lindemann will serve a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. And if the story has raised any issues for you, you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault and Family Violence Counselling Helpline on 1800-RESPECT, which is 1800-737-732. One man has died and 7 people have been critically injured after a Singapore Airlines flight from London to Singapore experienced severe turbulence. The Boeing 777 aircraft suddenly plummeted, sending dozens of passengers crashing into the ceiling of the plane. There were 56 Australians on board. The Foreign Affairs Department says at least 8 of them have been taken to hospital in Bangkok. More on that with our reporter in just a moment, but first, here's how the events unfolded.
Shaken by their ordeal, the passengers were met by an army of ambulances after they landed in Bangkok. They'd just been served breakfast when the Boeing airliner plunged without warning. A shot taken inside the cabin after the aircraft had landed.
Now, Singapore Airlines has taken to social media and apologised for this, what they said, deeply traumatic incident. They say that they're working with all relevant authorities on the investigation.
2 military planes carrying stranded Australians home from riot-stricken New Caledonia have returned to Brisbane. The French President Emmanuel Macron is flying to the French Pacific Territory to try and broker a new agreement that will restore calm. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts has more.
So far, we've had 2 planes returning to Australia. They both flew into Brisbane last night, and on board were 108 people. Of those, around 84 or so were Australians, and the rest were foreign nationals from countries that Australia has typically helped out in situations. And particularly at night, we're still seeing a small number of shops being lit on fire, and some roadblocks throughout the country persist. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out on the ground.
Israel has targeted a second media organisation under new foreign broadcasting laws, seizing equipment of the Associated Press and shutting down a live feed of the Gaza skyline. The media crackdown comes as Israel faces extra scrutiny over the war with Hamas. The International Criminal Court is considering an application for arrest warrants for the Prime Minister and Defence Minister. Middle East correspondent Alison Horn reports from Jerusalem.
The Associated Press, AP, is one of the major newswire organisations operating in Israel, and thousands of media.
You should outright condemn this step.
Judges of the International Criminal Court are now considering these arrest warrant applications. And although Israel isn't a signatory to the ICC, Australia is and would be obliged to arrest anyone named in a warrant.
And Israel has now reversed its decision to confiscate that camera belonging to the Associated Press. The Communications Ministry has issued a statement saying it's ordered the broadcasting equipment be returned. Donald Trump's lawyers have rested their case in his New York criminal trial without calling the former president to testify. Mr. Trump had previously insisted he would take the stand to defend accusations he falsified business records to cover up hush money payment, but his lawyers rested their case after calling only 2 witnesses. The jury was sent home and will return on May the 28th when closing arguments are expected. A South Australian police officer has been found not guilty of aggravated assault over the 2021 arrest of a 19-year-old woman. A warning: the story contains vision that some viewers might find confronting. Body-worn camera vision tendered in court shows Constable Bradley Moyle pull the woman to the ground and strike her twice. Appearing in the Mount Gambier Magistrates Court, prosecutors alleged he used excessive force, a charge Constable Moyle denied. The magistrate today found he didn't act with excessive force when he shoved her into a taxi, and while she found he did act with excessive force when he struck her, he believed he was acting honestly in trying to prevent a breach of the peace. The price tag of building a large-scale nuclear power plant in Australia will be at least $8.5 billion, according to the country's peak scientific agency, and take 15 years to deliver. The CSIRO has published its annual Gen Cost report, looking at the costs associated with different types of electricity generation. And it comes amid a political debate about what role, if any, nuclear can play in Australia's clean energy transition. For more, here is National Regional Affairs reporter Jane Norman. Hi, Jane. So what does the report tell us?
Well, this is the first time the CSIRO has actually analysed the costs of large-scale nuclear in Australia, and what it's found is investors in the US are really on edge for the release of chipmaker Nvidia's earnings on Wednesday night, Thursday morning our time. Checking commodities now, where spot gold prices are fairly flat, edging up very slightly, crude oil prices coming off a little, and the Australian dollar sitting at around 66.8 US cents, and that is finance.
Thanks, Alicia. The federal government is banning compounding pharmacists from making replica versions of weight loss drugs like Ozempic after a Four Corners investigation found patients were suffering side effects. Copies were allowed when brand name drugs were in short supply. However, they weren't checked by the TGA for safety, quality and efficacy. The duplicates will be banned from October. The government estimates at least 20,000 people are taking the medications in Australia, but it's thought the number could be much higher, with adverse side effects a possible outcome for users. The Health Minister, Mark Butler, says the replicas pose a significant safety risk.
The doctors' groups, the pharmacy groups, the pharmacy board, the medical board, consumer groups like Diabetes.
This is Asia Now.
Good morning. It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Lakia Silvarati at this hour. Cheers and relief as shaken passengers of an extreme turbulence hit Singapore Airlines flight arrive in the city-state. Dozens were injured and one dead from a suspected heart attack. No respite for millions in northern India amid an extreme heat forecasted to last for the next few days. Temperatures already soaring up to 47 degrees Celsius in some parts. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken faces grilling about Biden's Israel policy from protesters and senators during a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. One 131 passengers and 12 crew members from flight SQ321 have arrived in Singapore from Bangkok on a specially arranged flight. It touched down at about 5 a.m. this morning. Another 79 passengers and 6 crew members are still in Bangkok. A team of Singapore safety investigators is in Bangkok, Thailand, where the Singapore Airlines flight was forced to divert after extreme turbulence that caused a death. Around 70 other passengers were injured on SQ321, which departed from London and it was bound for Singapore. Aslam Shah reports from Changi Airport.
There were tears of joy and comfort in the arms of loved ones. After a traumatic experience and a long night, many of the passengers are finally home. They were closely escorted by airport staff to their respective ground transports, but not all are unscathed. Some with visible injuries on their bodies and even escorted on a wheelchair. Others look visibly distraught after going through a traumatic experience. And the incident has affected family members too. This man hopes that his 22-year-old son is not only physically well, but mentally too. While there are no signs of visible injuries, he wants his son to get a checkup to be safe. Other passengers managed to call their families from the plane. Many of the family members have been waiting for the arrival since Tuesday night. But barricades were put up hours before arrival of the passengers. Airport staff helped direct the passengers and the families from the luggage collection area to either the taxi stand or the pickup area. Hours ago, they were on Singapore Airlines Flight 321 from London when it hit severe turbulence. A 73-year-old British man with a heart condition was killed and others critically injured, forcing the pilot to divert to Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi Airport. In the cabin were scenes of chaos, trays overturned and oxygen masks deployed, other items scattered across the aisles. The turbulence reportedly happened just after lunch service when many passengers were not in their seats. On the ground, emergency vehicles were seen rushing the injured to hospital. Some were treated in tents. On board were about 211 passengers and 18 crew, of which 41 are from Singapore. Most of the other passengers are from Australia, the United Kingdom and New Zealand. SIA says the steep drop happened over the Irrawaddy Basin around 10 hours into what should have been a 13-hour flight. It has sent a team to Bangkok to assist and has apologized for what it says was a traumatic experience. On social media, Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and President Tharman Shanmugaratnam have sent their condolences to the loved ones of the deceased. Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat on Facebook had said relevant Singapore ministries and organizations are giving support to the affected passengers and their families. And these include Singapore Embassy officials. While the journey back home took half a day longer, the relief was worth the wait.
The CEO of Singapore Airlines has expressed regret over the incident and he says the flag carrier is committed to providing all necessary support to those affected during this difficult time.
On behalf of Singapore Airlines, I would like to express my deepest condolences to the family and loved ones of the deceased. We are very sorry for the traumatic experience that everyone on board SQ321 went through. Our priority is to render all possible assistance to our passengers and crew members.
We'll see any success Sambat in Bangkok with more on investigations into the cause of the incident.
Now, investigations are still ongoing. They actually have just begun. There will be transport officials from Singapore working together with their Thai counterparts to look into this matter, to look what exactly has happened. Working as well as representatives from Boeing, the maker of that plane. They are also in touch with Singapore Airlines and the Thai authorities to look into this matter. We don't have many new details, but there are auxiliary reports about what could have happened. Now, on Tuesday, we have reported that according to flight tracking data, the plane had a sudden drop of 6,000 feet within a very short period of time. Now, those flight tracking data websites say that that is not the moment when it hit turbulence. That is not the rapid descent. The rapid descent happened prior to that shortly. We do know, not only from Singapore Airlines, but also from other sources, that the plane suffered those air turbulence over Myanmar at the same time when there were many rainstorms and thunderstorms being reported there. This is, after all, the beginning of the monsoon season. This is where the incident happened. This is where people got hurt, and unfortunately also where one passenger passed away on board as well. Now, investigations are still ongoing. The care about the passengers and the injured passengers is still ongoing, but at least there's a happy end for other passengers. About 131 passengers have flown back to Singapore already, and they have arrived safely in Changi Airport. At least for them, their journey has found a happy end. CNA Bangkok.
Well, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board says it will send advisors to support Singapore's investigation. Officials say the flight was hit by unexpected severe turbulence and that it fell into an air pocket. Well, what exactly is turbulence and how dangerous is it? Liz Mio has more.
Now, turbulence is irregular air movement that causes erratic changes in the altitude or angle of the plane. It can be caused by storms, mountains, and strong air currents called jet streams. Now, the most dangerous kind of turbulence is known as clear air turbulence, which is completely invisible to the naked eye. Pilots only notice it when their plane goes through it. Now, most cases of turbulence are experienced only as mild shaking in the aircraft and a slight loss of elevation. But in rare cases, passengers and crew members can be injured. Now, passengers on board SQ321 say there was little warning before the plane made a dramatic drop. Those not wearing the seatbelts were immediately launched into the ceiling. One study projects that travelers will likely face more hazardous turbulence in the coming years because of climate change. That's as warmer air caused by elevated carbon emissions is changing wind speeds at high altitudes.
Now, turbulence is extremely common in air travel and occurs on most flights to a certain degree. At times, it can result in one or more serious injuries, but it's rarely fatal. In December 2022, at least 36 people were wounded after severe turbulence hit a Hawaiian Airlines flight up to 30 minutes before landing. The plane was traveling from Phoenix to Honolulu. And last August, some 11 people were hospitalized after a Delta flight encountered rough air on its descent into Atlanta. And more than 160 people were on board. The injuries from such incidents reportedly include lacerations, broken bones, head wounds, and loss of consciousness. And these happen mostly to passengers who aren't wearing seatbelts. Still, flight attendants remain the most at risk. Experts say they're 24 times more likely to be seriously hurt as they have to be on their feet for longer periods of time. Earlier, we spoke to Lethan Francis, managing director of Francis & Lowe, a firm that specializes in aviation, defense, and space, and we began by asking him how unusual is it for planes to experience severe turbulence.
I think every time we catch a flight, there will always be some level of turbulence, but to have an aircraft descend this quickly and this much is very unusual.
Well, clear air turbulence has been identified as a possible cause. That is like no visible warning in the sky ahead. It's hard to forecast. And studies have claimed that climate change increases clear air turbulence. So how so? And does this mean that air travel is about to get a lot more unpredictable?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a number of researchers around the world that have been doing research into climate change and the effects of climate change. And one of the conclusions that they've come to is that the warming of the planet affects the jet streams. That's at very high altitude, fast-moving winds. So they predict that there will be more cases of severe turbulence going forward because of climate change.
Lethan, one of the guests on our channel earlier has likened the incident to cancer. If it happens, it happens, suggesting that it occurs regardless of the plane's robustness or the pilot's skill. Would you agree that such an events are inevitable, and could this have been sort of avoided or handled better?
Oh, there are things that pilots can do to avoid turbulence. Like before a pilot embarks on a mission, they get a very detailed briefing that includes meteorological data. So they're actually trained to avoid areas where there's a lot of activity in terms of storm activity. By avoiding the storm activity, you can reduce the likelihood of encountering turbulence. And you'll experience that yourself when you're on an airplane. Sometimes there might be a delay in the plane landing. The pilot will tell you that they're circling the airport because there's some storm activity at the airport, and they'll wait for that storm activity to clear before landing. So there are things that pilots do to avoid turbulence, but it is correct that sometimes you cannot always detect a turbulence.
Right, and so are there certain regions that are more prone to clear air turbulence? So for example, areas that are more prone to temperature contrasts or even certain periods of the year?
Unfortunately, there are, and Singapore, where we are, and Southeast Asia is a region of the world that is known to have more storm activity than any other region in the world. So unfortunately for us being here in Southeast Asia, we're more likely to experience turbulence because of that. So basically, regions of the world where there's a lot of thunderstorm activity is more prone to turbulence.
Right. And so what are the solutions to avoiding, this clear air turbulence? I mean, if it's something that you can see, can detect ahead of time. I know you pointed out, some measures that pilots can take, but, with this clear air turbulence that become more frequent due to climate change, any measures that can be taken by airlines, for example?
Well, aircraft do fly at higher altitudes. So when you fly at a higher altitude, often you can actually fly over the weather. So that helps. And then, of course, getting that data, that meteorological data, analysing that data, and being very responsive, getting continually to get updates, which they do. The pilots continue to get updates on the weather patterns and the weather conditions where they're flying, and then they can also alter their flight path. They can tweak their flight path to avoid some of these weather situations.
Well, the passenger who died on board SQ321 has been named as Jeff Kitchen from Thornbury near Bristol in southwest England. The 73-year-old died of a suspected cardiac arrest, and his family in Bristol is seeing an outpour of tributes from their local community. John Beaver has more.
It's believed that Jeff Kitchen was on board the Singapore Airlines flight with his wife, headed for what a neighbour told reporters was the holiday of a lifetime that was due to last 6 weeks. Tributes have been paid to the retired 73-year-old grandfather, who was well known in his local town of Thornbury here in southwest England. Mr Kitchen was an active part of his local musical theatre group, who have paid tribute to him. They described him as a gentleman with the utmost honesty and integrity, who served the group and his local community for over 35 years. They've offered their thoughts and prayers to his wife and family. Mr Kitchen also ran for election in his town council last year, standing as an independent candidate trying to restore the vibrant and creative heart of the community. The UK Foreign Office have said in a statement that they're supporting the family of a British man who died in Bangkok and are in contact with the local authorities. John Beaver, CNA, Bristol.
And we have more coverage on our website and our mobile app, including a harrowing account of passengers on board that turbulent flight. They describe how the seatbelt sign was turned on moments before the plane dropped, and those not wearing seatbelt were launched into the ceiling, suffering injuries. And your Asia Business Update is coming up next with Olivia Marsuki. It's a monetary policy decision day in New Zealand. Olivia, what's the latest?
Well, New Zealand Central Bank kept its key interest rate unchanged as expected, but raised concerns that inflation may have fallen more slowly than expected. Plus, cryptocurrency prices gaining further ground on renewed optimism that U.S. regulators may approve Ether ETFs ahead of its deadline this week.
Several people remain trapped under the rubble on Monday after a three-story building undergoing a demolition collapsed suddenly in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemns ICC's request for arrest warrants, rejecting comparisons with Hamas as a complete distortion of reality. Several people remained trapped under the rubble on Monday after a three-story building undergoing demolition collapsed suddenly in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Eyewitnesses said many people were trapped after returning to salvage their belongings during a suspension in the works. Authorities have ordered several buildings in the area to be evacuated and demolished after heavy rains that have caused widespread flooding across the country. There might be about 8, 9 or 10 young men who were trapped there. So far so good, but the government has totally failed us today. Rescue efforts arrived too late after 5 hours with no help. A Red Cross official said 2 people were rescued and another 2 were still trapped. A local police chief in the area confirmed that only 1 person was brought out alive. As people were trying to salvage their steel, the building started collapsing. Those who heard shouts of the building going down quickly got out, and some who were on the upper floors feared jumping, and the building caved in with them inside. The floods are fueled by unusual heavy rainfall during Kenya's rainy season, which starts in March and sometimes extends up to June. South Africa's presidency welcomed the announcement by the ICC chief, who requested arrest warrants for Israeli leaders and 3 senior Hamas leaders over alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. South Africa has also filed a case against Israel at the ICC accusing it of genocide, a charge Israel denies. As Prime Minister of Israel, I reject with disgust the Hague prosecutors' comparison between democratic Israel and the mass murderers of Hamas. The US also expressed its disapproval. The US State Department echoed its sentiment, asserting that the ICC lacks jurisdiction in this case since Israel is not a signatory to the Roman Statute, the treaty that established the court.
This decision does nothing to help and could jeopardize ongoing efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement that would get hostages out of Gaza and surge humanitarian assistance in.
In Israel, the news sparked mixed reactions. Some residents expressed disbelief and frustration at the perceived equivalence drawn between Israel and Hamas. I don't understand in what world we are living in where there is symmetry between leaders of a terror organization who committed mass slaughter to heads of state who were democratically elected. In Gaza, the response was more subdued. A resident displaced from Gaza City expressed a desire for decisive international resolutions. We are the victims, although we have nothing to do with Israel or Hamas. We are not Hamas or Islamic Jihad. ICC judges will now review the evidence presented by the prosecutor to determine whether arrest warrants for the leaders can be issued. After the recent attack at the Palais de la Nation and the residence of Vital Kamerhe, Kinshasa, the capital of DRC, has gradually returned to its usual routine. However, the aftermath of the attack has left a trail of investigations and security measures in its wake. Images of the presidential palace on Sunday depicted a scene of chaos and violence, with bullet casing, bloodstains, and shattered glass littering the ground at the palace entrance. The spokesperson also disclosed that a total of 6 individuals were killed during the incident, including 3 assailants and their leader, Malanga. Around 50 perpetrators were also apprehended. Notably, among those arrested were 3 Americans, one of whom was identified as Malanga's son. Despite the gravity of the situation, Deputy Prime Minister assured the public that no citywide lockdown was imminent. Haiti's main international airport reopened on Monday for the first time in nearly 3 months after relentless gang violence forced authorities to close it to all traffic in early March. The reopening of the Toussaint Louverture airport in the capital of Port-au-Prince is expected to help ease a critical shortage of medications and other basic supplies since the country's main seaport remains paralyzed. However, only Sunrise Airways, a local carrier, is flying in and out of Port-au-Prince for now. US-based airlines are not expected to start doing so until late May or early June. The first flight expected was one from Sunrise Airways bound for Miami and scheduled to depart at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Before Monday's reopening, the Seoul airport was the one located in the north coastal city of Cap-Haïtien.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Goodman. Have a good life.